Hello and welcome to another episode of the Uncommon Energy Podcast. My name is Trainer Chip Ritchie, and of course, I am joined as always by my co-host Azul GG. This time, the champ Azul GG. What's going on, man? How you feeling?
I'm feeling good, doing good. Of course, the weekend went about as almost as good as it could. I won the whole thing, won the NAIC championships, and actually, it's funny. After that, I went to the casino. And I put 500 on black, and I won there as well. So I guess it was
Let's
just kind of my
go.
weekend overall. So yeah, really good weekend. Of course, even if I hadn't won, it would have been a very fun weekend in general. Pokemon events always are, but of course, winning makes it that much better. So yeah, really great weekend overall, and I couldn't be happier.
The guys taking dubs non-stop. Let's go. You love to see it. Yeah, I was really happy for you, man. It was super cool. I know that a IC win is something that you have been very close to before, and things just didn't quite
Yeah.
work out. So I am very happy for you that you got the major tournament win. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. I also had a great weekend. I was also at NAIC, of course. Got the opportunity to cast and we had an awesome weekend. We saw a lot of great close matches. I think that the finals game was extremely exciting, even though game three, like Isaiah got really unlucky in the beginning of the game, which we can talk about. But even still, he was not out of that game, even though he
Yeah.
got insanely unlucky. And that's what I love about Pokemon, man. Just the back and forth, the strategy playing out from both players. So yeah, we'll break it all down. Before we get much more into it, I do want to say a huge thank you to everyone who came up to both myself and Azul, said that you enjoyed our content, said that you enjoyed the podcast. We both gave out a ton of dice this weekend. I had to unfortunately tell a lot of people that I was out of dice. I'm sure Azul had to do the
Yeah.
same. But Azul will have some more at the World Championships this August. So if you're going to be at Worlds, another opportunity, and we will probably do another run of dice at some point. So if you didn't get one from us at a regionals, we'll do some more at some point. There will be another way for people to get an opportunity to get one. But yeah, thank you guys all so much for the support, of course.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was super sick to see how many people. I did not expect them to yeah, the amount of support was crazy. I wish we had more dice to give out to everyone, but I'm glad that we were able to give them out to some people and show our appreciation for the support for the podcast. So today we're going to be talking about my run winning NAIC with the Flying Pikachu. We'll talk about NAIC in general outside of that. Of course, we always have everyone's favorite segment, Guess That Flavor Text. This week, I'm going to be picking a card for Chip to try and guess. Um, some other stuff went down at NAIC. Specifically, the one thing that not just everyone in the Pokemon community knows about, but literally like everyone in general in gaming probably knows about is the jumbo cards that someone played at NAIC. And then we'll talk a little bit about the Pokemon Go set coming up as well, or that is coming out this week. So we've got some of our top picks from that set coming out. We'll go more into that next week as well once we have seen some of the stuff that people come up with, because there are some like pretty. It's there's a decent amount of cards that when you read them, it makes you stop and think about them, and that's what I've been liking. That we've been seeing a lot more of that the last couple sets, and specifically this Pokemon Go set. Even we won't have a major set release for the World Championships, we'll at least have this to work with. And there's a decent amount of cards where you read them, and you're like, that's interesting. What can I make that work with? So we have a decent amount of those in the Pokemon Go set. So hopefully that shakes it up a little bit going into Worlds.
Yeah, we'll talk
Um,
about Go a little bit more in depth next week. We'll also next week look at some of the new cards that were released or announced, I should say, from Lost Origin, which will
oh
be
yeah,
coming out in the fall for us. The Giratina V Star looks a little crazy. It might be a little high maintenance to get it going, but once you get it going, that thing just does 280 damage, which is pretty wild. So we'll talk about all of those things a little bit more in depth next week. For now, just sticking at a quick little preview and mostly talking about NAIC. And of course, speaking of NAIC, we got to start by talking about the champ, Azul GG. Man, you have been one of the most accomplished players in the game in the modern era. You've won 5 regional championships, of course, 4 of those being ones since the Cash era. Has been a thing. And how would you say that this win, being in internationals, of course, stacks up compared to all the success you've seen at the regional level?
I mean, it's good. Like I got second at LAIC 2018, I believe, 17, 18, or maybe it was
18.
16, 17. It was 18, yeah,
Hmm.
17, 18. So, I mean, that was great as well. And there's been like, I mean, there's been plenty of moments throughout regionals and ICs where I feel like I definitely could have placed better. A little bit more prepping for a deck, or a little bit more, or a little bit better gameplay overall. And of course, there's been moments where I felt like I got a little bit unlucky. Yeah, so there's been like other moments in the past where I feel like I could have been maybe walking away with a couple more wins, but it still feels really good to get this win. But I don't like to try and dwell on it too much, I guess. Like I'm still always looking forward to the next tournament. And of course the next big one is going to be Worlds, which is the biggest biggest tournament every season. So I'm a little bit more already kind of looking like I enjoyed it over the weekend, enjoyed the win, celebrated whatever. But now I'm already kind of looking ahead towards that next tournament. I feel like even if I was to, say win Worlds, whether it be this year or next year, or whenever, I would still be, as long as I'm still competing, I'd be looking towards, okay, when's the next season? When's this new season start? What's the first regional? That's what I'd be looking towards, instead of dwelling too much on the present and being too satisfied with where I currently am. Winning, even if I was to win Worlds at some point, my goal is still to win more, as much as I possibly can. So it's great. It feels like all the time and thought put into the deck choice, and then I feel like I played very well overall throughout the weekend as well. And that's like always like the biggest thing that I always tell people is like your play is the number one thing that's gonna. It doesn't matter if you play a subpar deck or your list isn't perfect. If you don't play well, none of that really matters. So that's like the biggest thing that I felt from coming out of the weekend was that I just felt like I played very well. So yeah, super happy with the dub overall.
You love to hear it. A true competitor, never satisfied, always wanting to keep pushing his limits. Yeah, you mentioned your second place at LAIC a couple of years ago. And I'm sure you remember it relatively well because it was a pretty memorable moment where
Yeah,
Diego, your opponent, needs one specific card and ends himself to two and just happens to get there. There's also a lot of other stuff that happened in that game. You got a double prize penalty for pace of play, I believe, if that's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Diego also made like a couple of mistakes that you wouldn't expect from someone in a finals game, where he like max elixirs before playing super rod and stuff like that, and then still hits the energy, doesn't ever get punished. And that, so like all of those things led to a pretty, I would imagine, deflating loss in the finals of that one. And then you
Yeah,
inflated, of
definitely.
course, with the Flying Pikachu to this event to take first. Is that something that you've kind of worn as like a little bit of a chip on your shoulder ever since then when you're competing at ICs?
I mean, maybe a little bit. I guess it's maybe a reminder that I gotta like make sure I do better from, or as well as I can. Like I said, like gameplay is like the number one thing. And I could have played. I don't know if I could. I don't remember maybe I probably. I mean, you could always play better, but I mean, the biggest thing was my pace of play. I could have played faster. I don't know if the actions I chose to make could have been better, but I definitely could have played faster. And yeah, like it, theoretically, I should have never had an opportunity in those games at all. But Diego definitely made quite a few missteps throughout game one and game two. Because I remember both games, I think I opened up dead. Like I was just like dead drawing for the start of both games. And then yeah, some questionable plays from Diego led to give me like a chance to get back into it. And then of course the double prize penalty in the first game. So it all kind of like escalated. Yeah, it was just one of those things where it's like so many little things. Yeah, definitely. That's a good way to put it. Very deflating loss. Like by the end of the loss, it was just like even though like I could see it coming, I knew it was possible. It was just like it felt that much worse with all the other build up around eventually, losing there. So yeah, I mean definitely just yeah, it feels good. I guess it is like a little bit of a reminder. So I always remember it as a reminder to push myself a little bit harder, a little bit further, and knowing that I haven't quite reached my limit yet for sure.
So you get the win this weekend with the Flying Pikachu, the same deck that you played at Milwaukee, and I believe it was only
Yeah,
like two cards different, one or two cards different, right?
I
Something
think
close. I
three
mean,
total.
three
Yeah, it
total.
was pretty
Okay.
close. Yeah.
So very similar to what you played in Milwaukee. You got a 10th place, a top 16 finish the weekend previous. We talked about it a little bit on the podcast last week. You did still say it was a deck you liked, and you could see it being a deck you would play for the internationals. And obviously, you did choose to still stick with it. Why was that? Why did you choose to stick with Flying Pikachu for the tournament going in? And then as the rounds started to play out, were you pretty comfortable with that choice, say at like round 3, round 4, that time frame?
Yeah, so played it from Milwaukee because it seemed like a pretty good play, and ended up being a pretty good play at Milwaukee. And then going to NAIC, we talked about it, and we were like, "There's no way we play this deck again going into NAIC." And that was like our initial idea. Was like, "Okay, we're doing this for Milwaukee. Hopefully, it goes well." And it went okay overall. And then we're like, "Okay, but there's no way we play this for NAIC." So we're like, "Okay, what do we play for NAIC?" And we got to like the point when in our discussions where it was like, we still don't want to play Palkia and Teleon. And actually, our Palkia and Teleon list was very similar to what Bradner's ended up being. We're quite down to the 3 Sobble. I still don't know if I like the idea of 3 Sobble. That's like the number one thing when everyone looks at the list. They're like,
Right.
you only have 3 Sobble in there. You know that, right? Did you like forget your 4th Sobble or something?
Left him at
I
home,
think
had to swap it out or something.
there's some pretty solid reasons behind only doing the 3 Sobble. But at the end of it all, like, we just don't want to play. I specifically very much did not want to play Palkia and Teleon. I was like, why would I want to play the best deck that all the best players in the world are going to be playing? Why do I want to play that many mirror matches, especially with Arc and Teleon gaining um, more popularity and also a deck that would be piloted by a ton of very good players? Is like, why would I want to play a bunch of these Inteleon mirror matches all day one into all day two? So we're like, all right, let's run once again, ran our spreadsheet, put our percentages in there for the matchups, put our how popular we thought each of the decks that would be. And initially, the deck that won the spreadsheet was actually Arceus Charizard. But we're like, okay, let's take a look at this.
I'm
And let's
surprised to hear that. I gotta
we
question Caleb's spreadsheet a little bit if that's the case.
we mess around with the win rates a little bit more, and we're like, let's because we knew that Szymanski and the Kreklos were very confident in that deck's chances against Palkia, but we're like, let's bring it back a little bit closer to like a 50-50. And then we did test the Mew matchup, and that matchup was not good for Arceus Charizard at all. So we
Yeah.
brought that a little bit worse. And then Flying Pikachu once again won the spreadsheet. So we're like, okay, it did it again. And when we look at the meta, we're like, okay, there's a couple decks that we expect to leave the meta that were good matchups, like the Reggies. We didn't expect Reggie to be very popular at all. It wasn't. We're like, okay, Arceus Pteranodon's a good matchup for us, though, and we expect that to gain a little bit of popularity. And then if we put the Phoebe in over the Shauna, we beat Blissey Miltank, even if they play the Tornadus. So we add the Phoebe in over the Tool Jammer. And then we cut the Shauna for second research to have a more consistent draw supporter. And then we're like, okay, we beat everything we want to beat. And like the meta doesn't shift enough. The only deck to be scared of is how popular will Arceus and Teleon be. I was pretty confident in the matchup not being terrible. I do think it's an unfavorable matchup. I did end up going 101 against it on the day. And I think everyone else who played the list didn't have terrible records against Arceus and Teleon. But it is very much a matchup where if they set up and draw well, they're going to beat you a majority of the time. But they also don't draw as well as you do on average. Like your first 2 turns of the game are maybe the most powerful first 2 turns of the game out of like any deck in the format by being an Arceus B-Barrel deck. So I was pretty confident the matchup was pretty close. It's just like it feels bad when you both sit down and actually play a game against Arceus and Teleon. They usually win. So you do have to kind of cheese out a win from them drawing poorly or just completely dead drawing. But that happens to their deck. That happens to Inteleon decks way more than it does Arceus B-Barrel decks. So that's where a lot of my wins in general came from. Is just I played more games than my opponent a lot of the time throughout the tournament.
Yeah, and you talked about that a little bit last week when we were talking about your run in Milwaukee, because you had previous to playing Flying Pikachu in Milwaukee, you'd played Mew at every single regionals
Yeah.
before that point. Did you feel like how much more in control of your games did you feel playing Arceus Bibarel compared to the Mew VMAX deck?
Not too much more actually, to be honest. Like I guess in control, like I just felt like I played more games, and maybe that's just the most important part. But when I went up against a Palkia who was playing the game, or a Palkia deck or a Mew deck that were both like sitting down and they didn't just dead draw, I didn't feel like I was in that much more control than them. But the deck is very good at making your opponent draw poorly. Like you play for Path, and you play for Marnie. And all of the explosive power from Mew and Palkia comes from their abilities that Path shuts off. So even if they weren't completely dead drawing, you get him with a Marnie and a Path on the right turn and have it stick for just long enough. I mean, you're just going to be walking away with a lot of dubs that way as well. So I guess I just like felt like I was playing more games. I guess more in control. I didn't overly feel like in too much control. I felt very helpless against Mew, having played Mew for those first 3 tournaments, going up against Mew. You feel really helpless. Like I did beat all the Mews I played against, but you're just sitting there and like, please get tails, please get tails, please get tails, please get tails. and they're just flipping coins, Cramomatic catcher. So yeah, I beat all the Mews I played against, but it was very much, it's literally all on their side of the board every single turn. Like whatever I do on my turn literally just doesn't matter. I throw out my Marnie, throw out my path. If they have the counter stadium, who knows? Until you get firmly ahead in the prize exchange, which is really, really hard to do in the matchup. You're always just hoping that they're flipping tails on their turn and finding your paths and finding your Marnie. So yeah, against the Mew matchup specifically, I felt like I had no control. It was just all on them all the time. But I did feel like I was playing more games, which is important, of course. And the games with Arceus Peak do go pretty long, which gives you more opportunity to just consistently play better than your opponent. So I guess yes, the answer is yeah. I did feel overall more in control throughout the week playing this than playing Mew.
So you ended up playing this deck, and you had a really, really good day one.
Yeah.
Some would say as good of a day one as you could have, since you end the day at 9-0. You were in the blue pod, is that correct?
Yeah. No, I was in the yellow pod.
The yellow pod. Okay. And from looking at the players in the yellow versus the players in the blue pod, it definitely seemed like the yellow pod was weighted a little bit more heavily towards like the top end. Did you feel like that, or did you feel like they were pretty close to equal?
I guess I didn't really think about it too much. When I sat down for round 7, though, I sat down. I was playing against Natalie, and Kaiwin was right next to me. I knew Tord was in our pod,
Yeah.
so I guess like maybe once I sat down there, I was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. Literally sat down to play against Natalie, and then yeah, Kaiwin was table 1 right next to us. So yeah, I didn't really think about it too much. I actually just there were some people who I thought didn't even come to the tournament. I wasn't sure if Pedro was at the tournament. Or Robin for a little while. I was like, did they even come to the tournament? I wasn't sure because I hadn't seen them all day, but
They
they
were
were just
both
in
in
blue
your
pod.
pod.
Yeah. Pedro and Robin?
They were both
They're
in
both
your
in
pod.
blue.
I thought they were both in your pod. Maybe not.
I'm pretty sure. I'm 100% sure Pedro was in blue. I don't know about Robin. Robin might have been in yellow, but yeah, I didn't see them the whole day. I was like, did Robin? Did any of the other Europeans come? I wasn't sure who actually ended up showing up, because they were all in the blue pod the whole time. So,
Okay. Yep.
But yeah. I mean, I didn't really think about that too much. But yeah, I ended up going 9-0 in day one, which was I think the first time anyone's done it at NAIC.
That's not true. That's not true.
Ooh,
I got
I
yelled
know it's
at.
been done
Not
at
yelled
Nats
at.
before.
No, Adam Hawkins went 9-0 at
Oh, did he really?
NAIC in 2017. I do
Malamar?
believe. So yes, congratulations to Adam, and I apologize that that was incorrectly said on the live stream.
All right, I guess I'm tying Adam up then. We both have a 9-0 at
Which
NAIC
is tough
then.
to do. It's the biggest tournament player base wise of the year. All of the best players in the world are at the tournament. And Worlds, you're never going to go 9-0 because Worlds isn't that many rounds. Worlds is usually 6 or 7 rounds, right? So,
Yeah.
really impressive. Absolutely 9-0. It's tough to do it at regionals. I would say NAIC is the toughest tournament to do it at for sure. So, congrats to you on that. We don't have to go like round by round or anything, but is there like 1 or 2 matches from day one that really stand out to you as like they were really close, hyper competitive, weren't sure if you were going to win them? And then you're just able to squeak it out, or were you just kind of dominating people?
No, I don't think at all in day one, to be honest. I was mostly pretty. I did lose some games, but pretty convincing victories, I think, overall for the most part. A lot of my closest matchups, actually, in general, was up against Noah with playing Palkia. I played them day 1, day 2, and top 8. And that was a lot of my closest games were up against them, actually. But yeah, besides that, I mean, it was pretty. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like overly dominant, but I felt pretty comfortable in most of my wins. I didn't feel like there was like many routes for my opponent to take in a lot of the games I was winning. I was like, they don't really have that many options to actually win. I'm just ahead, and I'm pretty sure I can just stay ahead this whole game, because the deck is so. I guess that's another strength I didn't even think about the deck overall, and it just kind of naturally is. You're just really Roxanne proof with the B barrel or double B barrel on board, or just having like so many attackers set up on your board. They can't go like Roxanne KO your only attacker, because when you attack with Arceus, you set up 2 to 3 attackers in a single attack. So the deck is super Roxanne proof, which I didn't really think about as like a win condition you're limiting from your opponent, until like right now, to be honest. It was happening the whole time throughout the tournament. I was like, okay, I don't care if they Roxanne me. They can Roxanne me if they want. It's all, I don't care. And then they would, and then it wouldn't matter.
Right.
So really, and that's like a win condition that a lot of decks look to have as an option, but for sure the Inteleon decks, but taking that away from them was actually a pretty big deal overall when I think kind of think back on it now.
Yeah, and the Intellium mirrors a lot of times were coming down to the Roxanne plays.
Yeah.
And we actually saw it, I think, a few times where one Intellion deck would Roxanne the other player and then put up like a one prizer so they couldn't win the next turn. Like attack with Intellion that turn, right? And then the
Mhm.
other Intellion player would say, like, okay, I can't win this turn because I only have a couple cards, but I can Roxanne them back. And so they would return the Roxanne and then not win, but put up an attack or take out the one prizer. And I don't know. It was like Roxanne back and forth, who ends up being the victor. So having a answer to Roxanne definitely seemed pretty good for this weekend, which just naturally occurred because of the support line you had as opposed to Intellion. So yeah, going into day 2, you're sitting at 9-0. We're combining pods. Do you do anything like between Friday and Saturday night as far as looking at the list on PokeStats, try to figure out what people were playing? Was there any sort of looking at streamed games to figure out the lists, the like other players who'd been on stream, or were you just kind of vibing with where you were at 9-0?
No, nothing too extensive. I mean, I like checked the when I went up against someone who I didn't know what they were playing. I checked the stats list to see if I could find what they were playing. But I didn't like go to the stream games to try and find lists. I knew like going into uh day 2 that I was going up against John round 1, and I knew he
Mm-hmm.
was playing Palkia. But yeah, there's like the extent of my research because I talked to the other people in the other pod towards the end of the day. Figured out that John was 801, so we knew we were playing up against each other first round day 2, and yeah, beat John in that first round. And then from there I pretty much knew what everyone else was playing at that point. Every time I went up against them, I knew exactly what they were playing, I'm pretty sure, at that point. So and I had like, yeah, I guess just kind of briefly go over the rest of my day 2. I played against an Arcantel in the next round, and in that matchup, I was like, all right, well, if I can just squeak out a game, we're just going to naturally tie, because that set will just never finish if one of us wins a game. Like if we each win
If
a
you
game,
each
game
win a
1 and
game,
game
yeah.
2. Yeah, there's too many challenge cares, and that's what happened. Game 1, I actually got off to a pretty good lead in game 1, but my hand was stuck, so I was never able to like find my Charon's cares or like set up my board state early. I was like attacking with one Arceus, KO 2 things before they actually attacked with Arceus, and then they got ahead. They got their board state established, found their Charon's cares so much easier than me, and I lost. Game 2, they dead drew, and then game 3, we were a couple turns in. I think I could have won actually the game 3 if we had more time. I was definitely ahead, and it was ahead on Charon's cares remaining and all that, but went to time. So like I thought, I took a game, they took a game, tied, played against Sander, managed to squeak out a game against Sander in Swiss, and that gave me a lot more info on how I could play the matchup against Sander actually, and what I wanted to do if should I play them on later on, and then managed to squeak out a game there against Sander in the Swiss and tied that one. And then it got a little bit rough. Played against Noah. I lost to Noah there, and that one I definitely got a little tilted. I don't know. I just kind of went on tilt after that one, to be honest. And um,
Because you come
I
into day 2 at 9-0, and then you're sitting
yeah
on the day at 102, and then you lose, so you're 1-1-2. I mean, you really only need like one more win, and you're locked up
yeah
pretty much, and you
yep.
can't close it out. That's got to be really frustrating.
Yeah, it definitely was. Yeah, against Noah, I just kind of like I didn't misplay against Noah, I don't think, or anything. And like I said, Noah played the matches really close against them all week, or all weekend. So against Noah, yeah, I lost that one. I kind of went on tilt. Then I went up against Kaiwin, and we go to game 3, and I definitely misplayed. I think I should have won that set if I played really poorly in game 3. I like, should have established a B barrel like 2 turns prior, and then I just didn't do it. And I was fortunate enough to get like a heads on a paralysis with the Pikachu V. And then for some reason, I tunnel vision on Kaiwan's only out being the catchers or whatever they're called. And then
Cross
I like
switcher.
retreat the Pikachu to the Bidoof, and then he just goes boss KO, and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot you also play boss. So yeah, I definitely threw pretty extensively against Kaiwan in game 3, but managed to bring it back in on my 3rd win in a row up against Piper, playing the Arceus and Teleon with Metacham. Also had the Goon Choice Belt, which no one else was really playing at all. The Goon Choice Belt has kind of been a staple in Arceus up until the most recent format, because in Arceus Mirrors, you want to try and get every possible edge you can, and one of the ways you do it is by going attack turn 2 with the Choice Belt plus the Zigzagoon to actually 1-hit KO an Arceus V off the start. So Piper had that in there, and in this one, I was actually saved by the Thunder Shock from the Pikachu. There was like Piper just pulled off the play, KO my Arceus V, and on my turn, I played a Marnie, drew nothing, and I was like, well, Thundershot, got heads. Piper went draw and pass. And then from there, managed to set up my board, started swinging with Arceus, a Marnie or a Roxanne a turn or two later, and they were pretty much locked out of the game. They just dead drew off that, and then I was just like boss away on double Draziles or something from there to close it out. So I was not feeling super confident going into that final win, and it was an unfavorable matchup. Piper's a great player, and then in game three, it had a rough start. I was kind of like mentally checked at that point. Then I had to go into a Thundershock. I don't even remember what the name of the attack of the Pikachu's. I think it's Thundershock, but I'm actually not sure.
The
Whatever.
first
Flip
one
the
I
coin.
think is Thundershock, and the second one is Fly.
Fly, yeah, fly, yeah. So got a Thundershock heads and was managed to get it back from there and then get into top cut.
Yes, so a little bit of a whirlwind coming in
Yeah,
at so good. I mean, coming in at 9-0, and then you have a favorable matchup round one on stream. You win really quickly round one on stream as
oh
well. You
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of from there know you only need one more win, and it's just like a slog to try to make it happen. So you get that win. But then you realize that the bubble is a thing that
yeah.
someone is going to miss of all of the people with 35 match points. Were you worried that it was going to be you, or did you feel like kind of okay since you came in at such a high record? You're probably going to have pretty solid resistance, right?
Yeah, I mean, I thought about it for like a second. I was like, it is possible I whiff here because someone does whiff. But like, I was like, pretty much everyone I played against was in top cut. Like, I played against Sander, Kaiwin. Kaiwin was the eventual bubble. Brian with Yarkis and Talion. John had a really good record at that point as well. Ended up top 16. So I was like, there should be no way I'm the person to whiff. And I ended up being like fourth or fifth seed. I think I was fifth seed. So I
Mhm.
was not even close to being the person to whiff, I don't think. So yeah, I didn't really need to be worried overall. Like I was worried initially when I heard there was a bubble, and I was like, okay, now I'm on the potentially on the bubble out. But then I like thought about it for like a little bit longer, and I was like, there's just no way it's going to be me. Like my resistance has to be too good. It's got to be someone else. Yeah, it did end up being Kaiwin to bubble at ninth overall.
So in top 8, you play against Noah, and at this point you were 0-1-1 against him in the tournament. Is that right?
Well, we were one. I beat him in day one. They beat me in day two.
Okay, so
So we
you're
were one and
one and
one.
one. So now you're coming into top 8. I mean, the list, any sort of text that they may or may not have. Um, it looks like, just looking over the list really quickly, we didn't have Noah on the stream, so I didn't know their list exactly. But
Yeah, so they had
the rare candy is kind of the thing
yeah
that's sticking out to me right now.
the rare
Uh,
candy,
mhm,
echoing horn, quick shoot. Quick shooting was actually one that was like up and down depending on who you played against
sure.
for sure. So.
So all those things considered, you're going in, you're 1-1, into top 8, biggest tournament of the year. What's going through your mind?
I just like knew it was like they played really well. They had played it really well up to that point. And it was actually funny. I was like, up to this point, I don't think Noah had like pretty much everyone else who who had played against was playing Poke had bricked a game. Like Kaiwin bricked a game, Natalie bricked a game. Pretty much every Poke player I'd played up to this point had bricked a game. And even it was funny going into the match against John on day one. I was like, well, he's gonna brick one of the three, so I just got to win one of the two.
He just happened to break
Um,
2.
yeah, he just having a brick too. But yeah, Noah hadn't bricked a game yet, so I was like, all right, maybe Noah can get the brick fight. I don't think Noah bricked any of the games though. We had some pretty good. Oh no, one of the games Noah did draw pretty slow. But yeah, Noah was gonna play it well. I knew their list pretty well. So yeah, I was just like, I mean, it's just another Palkia deck. I have the advantage overall. As long as I can draw decently, it should be a victory. But yeah, it was a super close set. All three games, I think I remember. I said like one of them, I think they drew a little bit slow, but besides that, like it was a pretty good set overall. They played really well, and yeah, managed to get the dub there over another Palkia. Thankfully, after going 0-2 against Palkia up to that point, that felt good.
And then in top 4, you are playing up against Sander with his Mewtwo v Union Miltank. You tied him in Swiss. You kind of had an opportunity at that point to figure out what exactly was going on with the deck. And I'm sure it's also one of those things where, after round 2 or whatever, people are like, did you see what Sander is playing? And like he was on stream round 2. So I'm sure there had been talks about like strategies and how to beat it and stuff like that. What was kind of your game plan going in based on all the talks you had and also your tie with him in Swiss? What was your game plan going in based on that? And then also like, how did it play out? Were you able to play to that game plan?
Yeah, so I mean, the game plan was basically just draw a prize card every single turn if possible, and then also pressure the Snorlaxes sometimes over just KOing the active, even if I have the option of it, because eventually Sander would be forced into a double Miltank board, and if the sooner I can do that would mean Sander had that much less time to actually establish kind of the loop at the end of the game and make it be as clean and like be able to access the cards they want to access to be able to set up their game plan as soon as possible, right? So if you like KO, if you stop them from being able to use Snorlax a couple times, like I think in that game I bossed Snorlax once or twice, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but my goal was to just like pressure the Snorlaxes, basically take the KOs on the Snorlaxes, knock those out, remove those from play, make sure they don't get as many Gourmandizes as possible, so they see that many less cards, which
And
means
you
that
also like Marnied away several
yeah,
like he would like have a Snorlax active and no other Snorlax on the bench, and you would go Marnie knockout. So like he
yeah,
is gonna have a hard time responding as well.
yeah, exactly, and then like limit how many cards he gets access to every single turn was basically the game plan, and then eventually it comes down to the Miltanks, but because he's had less time to kind of set up his board state, two Phoebes can get through two Miltanks, and then Crobat plus B Barrel, I was just hoping would be enough to get through a third Miltank. And I like basically knew the list at the point. Like there was no way for Sander to like disrupt my board state. Like there was no way for him to stop me from being able to use Phoebe twice. Or there was a way to stop me from attacking with Crobat. There was the Parasol, but if I could get around the Parasol, the Crobat would do some poison damage. B Barrel could get up there to start to swing to do some damage, and then yeah, a couple a couple tails in a row to start off with was also pretty big in the early turns. But yeah, if I can squeak out one game in the matchup, then it becomes very hard for Sander to win from there. Because for Sander to win two games before time is up without me drawing a single prize card in the third or being ahead on the prize exchange in the third game, because that's what Sander was going for in the third game was like Turbo Mewtwo to just start swinging for 300 damage as soon as possible. So um, wouldn't have worked for how well I drew in the third game. Like I was pretty much set up. I was actually waiting for Sander to put the Mewtwo on the board because then I would have Starbirth for the Crobat plus the boss and just one hit KO'd it immediately. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it would have been really tough. So as soon as I squeaked out that first game, I knew. I mean, it takes the deck a while to win. So I knew like just like gonna sit there and just like make game two last as long as possible. Like I was just max ballooning over and over again, stopping the Miltank damage from
Hmm.
happening. I was like, I'm just gonna do this as long as I can. And then, at the end of game two, Sander brought out the Mewtwo and cleaned up two of my balloons, but wasn't enough time in game three once I got like that first prize card or two.
Right. Yes, and it's no secret that these type of control slash stall decks have a hard time in Top Cut because
Yeah.
of the way that single elimination rules work. If you are tied 1-1 games in game three and time is called, after +3 turns, whoever is ahead on prizes is the winner. And of course, control and stall decks generally don't take prizes. Sanders' deck is obviously capable of taking prizes, but it's usually not doing it until like the end of the game and only in certain matchups. As far as like how you would optimally wish to play the deck. So yeah, that's definitely like it's like a known thing, right?
Yeah.
Going in, like I know that that's something you're aware of when you're sitting down to play your top four match. And so how do you balance like knowing the rule and knowing how time favors you in that spot, but then also at the same time playing within the rules and not trying to slow play or stall out for the like how do you know what I mean? Like the clock management without stalling, right? Egregiously.
I mean, just like what I did in game two, I just draw Max Balloon, Marnie when I felt like it was appropriate. I was actually looking for an opportunity to maybe Marnie deck out Sander, but I think they were aware of
Yeah,
aware
I
of
don't
that as
think
a
Sanders
constant
gonna
win
give you that
condition.
one.
Yeah, because Sander had 5 cards a couple times. I was like, is it possible that Sander ever goes down? I was also thinking, is it correct for me to like ever Marnie like deck them out? But that's like I knew Sander had a way to recover cards, and I actually think I mean there was one Silene that I think if Sander had gotten double tails, I actually would have decked out.
Yes.
In game two. I think there was one like they needed one of those two heads. They went two Silings in a row, and I believe got double tails. And that last Silene they played ended up getting a heads or a double heads, got the pal pad back, and was able to reset from there. But yeah, I was looking for an opportunity to maybe play a Marnie to deck him out, but I don't think Sander was ever going to give that to me. They had 5 cards a couple times, and I was like trying to think in my head, does it ever make sense to put them down to 0 cards right now? Because they would, Marnie up to 4 plus draw for turn. I was like, I couldn't think of a reason to, so I never did it. I don't know if that would have put more pressure on Sander to have to make a play more aggressively, so maybe I should have done it there. But yeah, I was just trying to hold my Marnies as much as possible. Just make sure, like, if Sanders, for some reason, if Sanders' game plan ended up having to be to try and deck me out, that I would have plenty of like I just wasn't playing my Marnies that aggressively in the mid game in the game two, and I was just trying to max balloon as much as possible, just prevent that damage from the Miltank. Because what happened at the end of game two is that Sander eventually built up enough damage on both of my Pikachu's, and then went into the Mewtwo and used the attack that put 16 damage counters on the board
Yeah,
and
Mewtwo's right
KOs.
leg is a little too strong.
Yeah, and then KO'd both of my things. I was like, yeah, okay. And then but then going into game three because I was sitting there and max ballooning the whole time, making sure I didn't deck out, saving my Marnies to make sure I wouldn't deck out. Going into game three, there just wasn't enough time for Sander to ever set up a reasonable like Sander could never win on like was never going to be able to like apply the deck out strategy or anything similar to what they did in game two. But there wasn't even enough time for Sander to potentially like go for like a Turbo Mewtwo, or try and cheese a knockout with a Miltank. So yeah, it just wasn't ever enough time to really do anything there, and so it's pretty easy to take the dub once it got to game three.
So it does go to game three. You end up getting the win. Would have been a little interesting if Sander had left just a Miltank in play
Yeah,
because you did prize your Phoebe.
yeah,
And maybe it's something, I mean, we've talked about it a little bit. Maybe it's something that Sander, his win condition was to play to you prizing the Phoebe since he started Miltank and try to just attack for route for, 30 damage or whatever, 10 damage, and try to take a KO with that before you're ever able to build up enough to KO with Crobat or Bibarel, but it's pretty tough for him regardless, right? In that situation.
yeah. I mean, yeah, because like even if you do get aggressive attacks with the Miltank, not being able to see any cards with the Snorlaxes at all, or be able to go through your deck at all, like all I have to do is set up the Crobat VMAX and start poisoning you, and then go into B barrels, and I should be able to get a prize card first, even if my even with my Phoebe being prized. Yeah, obviously the Phoebe's not prized there. You just kind of lose no matter what. So I think Sander went a different aggressive route where they went for trying to just get the Mewtwo out as soon as possible, and then trying to start to swing with that aggressively, which didn't end up. There wasn't definitely wasn't enough time to pull that off. So yeah, probably. I mean, in the situation, going with the lone Miltank definitely would have worked potentially. I think I still had the advantage. Like between Crobat plus B Barrel, I think I would have been able to get a knockout
But it might have
first.
given Sander a
But
slightly better chance. But it's
yeah, I
hard for
think it
him to
probably would have been
know
it.
that, like, it's like, is it worth it to play to that out that Phoebe is prized, right? And
Yeah,
he
it's definitely a
determined to
tough
know.
call.
Yeah.
Because the
Okay.
chance of it being prized is like, so low, like 95% of the time you're losing that game because it's not going to be prized or whatever.
Sure. Okay, so you win that top four match. It was definitely a very exciting one. Sander obviously played the most unique deck at the tournament, so congrats to
Yeah.
him on getting top four with such a cool deck. We'll talk a little bit more about his deck and strategy when we get to it in the meta recap. But for now, we're talking about Azul's run still into the finals. So did you stick around and watch the other top four match play out? Because you were on for the first top four match.
Yeah. No, it didn't stick around at all. Just kind of left the venue, went to go get food, but it wasn't very long, I don't think. I think, didn't it like Bradner donk them like 2 games in a row or something?
He got the donk in the first game and then just kind of outpaced him really heavy in game two.
Yeah.
It didn't. It was not a super long set. Um, but yeah, so Bradner ends up getting the win over Brian Kim. There's kind of a little bit of a cool story there as well because Brian's first tournament was like Costa Mesa Regionals in 2018, I think, which I actually think is a tournament you won, by the way. But he was in seniors and he played against
Yeah.
Bradner in top four, and Bradner ended up winning the tournament. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like a little bit of a cool story there of like, okay, now I'm playing against this guy again. I played him at my first tournament. We're in a similar spot, top four, playing for a final spot. But Brian just wasn't quite able to get things rolling in the optimal way. Isaiah ends up winning and moving on to the finals. And he had a couple of little choice words in regards to you and his winner's interview, where he said, quote, I believe verbatim quote, I'm playing up against some Twitch streamer. I think I've watched his stream a couple of times. Should be a pretty easy win for me. Thoughts, Azul?
I mean, it was not, unfortunately for Bradner, was not as easy as they thought it was going to be. Forgot about that, Palkia bricks everyone in 3 games. So forgot about that one. And then that did come up in the third game.
Obviously, just a bit of fun. Zul
Yeah, of
and
course, of
Isaiah are
course.
friends. And yeah, so what kind of preparation, once you saw Isaiah was going to be your opponent in the finals, playing for 10K, a 5K money match effectively, and also the title of international champion. Isaiah is someone who's played in 3 championship Sundays in a row. He got second place at NAIC in 2018 in seniors. He won NAIC in seniors in 2019, playing in Masters finals in 2022. So yeah, how did you prepare? Did you just get kind of rested up, or did you look at his list? Did you guys what did you do to get ready?
I didn't do anything super special. Like, yeah, got the list and then just kind of I knew like the 60 at that point because Brandon had been on stream so many times, so like it wasn't hard to get the 60. So just knew the 60. It's still just Palkia. There's nothing really to test against. I did kind of they didn't play a lot of basic Pokemon. There was only 9 basic Pokemon total, so I made an extreme mental note of that while I was playing throughout the games, and I was like, I could just like, I know I can just limit his damage. Like once, especially in game 2, I had an option of boss KOing something or KOing the Zigzagoon. And I chose to KO the Zigzagoon there because I knew how much it could limit their damage output or limit his damage output. So I was like, I'm going to KO this Zigzagoon on because there was 3 scoop up nets left. I was like, if I let this thing go back to the bench, like who knows how much damage it'll actually rack up through scoop up nets later on. I was like, I'm gonna KO this basic Pokemon here, remove that from play, remove away the ping damage. There's no quick shooting in the list, so KO that. And I was like, and now I have the option to just kind of take boss KOs. Like maybe after I KO a Palkia with a big Pikachu, I could go back into Arceus and just take boss KOs on some Sobbles or Drizzles or whatever, and then just kind of run them out of Pokemon. Never like once you take 4 knockouts, you can't fill their bench anymore. They only play 9 Pokemon. So once you take four knockouts, they're sitting with 4 bench Pokemon for the rest of the game. So like that's something I kept in mind throughout the whole time. And once I KO'd the Goon, actually, I knew at that point it was impossible. And that was in game 2, I believe. It was impossible for Bradner to actually KO my Crobat or my Flying Pikachu because they cap out at 290 with the Choice Belt. So there's no way, even if I fill my bench, and that's what I did in game 2, I believe I put the second B barrel down, I think, or second Bidoof. I was like, well, if I KO the Zigzagoon, put down second Bidoof, they still can't KO unless they want to go into an Aqua Bullet, but their V-Star power had already been used at that point, I think. So I was like, they're just 2-hit KOing my Crobat or my Pikachu for the rest of the game. Like these are just they can't 1-hit KO these anymore. So yeah,
So,
the fact that they played so few bench Pokemon, I definitely made played so few Pokemon. I made a big note of for sure.
so game 1 did not go great for you. You go second, you lose the flip, which is obviously going to be somewhat of a factor. Your deck is one that can handle going second because you can pull off turn 1 Trinity Charge and just load up a Pikachu, or get, whatever else set up. You had to play Crobat down, I think, if I remember right, in that first game as well. And Isaiah just had a nuts turn 2 where he gets cross switcher, hydro break, KO your Arceus with an energy on it. When that
Yeah.
happens, like you had to have a pretty good feeling like that game was not really going to go your way most of the time.
Yeah, no, that one felt like it was pretty much over pretty early. I think I stuck around for a little bit, tried to string some Marnies
You
together or
did, yeah.
something, hoping something would stick. But I think I also on that first game I could have put a Path to the Peak in play and chose not to. And I think I probably just should have just limit the draw power from the Greninja, which is a
Oh
huge deal
yeah, it
for
was
them.
also funny too. In that game, he prized his 1 training
Yeah.
card. I remember the turn where it was like you could have put the path in play, but you wanted to have a Starbirth option the
Yeah.
next turn, so you didn't put it in play. But like he would have not been able to respond to it because his court was not there. So I mean, it's
Yeah.
like one of those things where obviously maybe looking back and having perfect knowledge of prize cards, you could say this was correct, but in the moment you don't have that knowledge, so it's hard to know, right?
Yeah, I think I probably should have, like, when I look back on that one, I think I probably should have put the Path to the Peak in play. It's kind of like a lot of my games actually were like, in a lot of matchups, you want to be aggressive with Path to the Peak, but I had so many games against Palkia where I just could not find Path to the Peak when I wanted it. I think it was like the same thing in game 3, where it's like I Marnied, and I was like, all right, Path to the Peak here is insane. I got 4 of them in the deck, and I was like, nope, no Path to the Peak. All right. That happened so often to me where I'd play the research or play the Marnie and be like, well, I can't Starbirth for it anymore at this point, but if I draw into it, pretty good. I play 4 of them, and I just like never would see them. So Path to the Peak definitely eluded me a little bit throughout the weekend overall, I think, but didn't end up mattering too much in the long run.
So you lose game 1, you're in the finals. There's a lot on the line. I mean, obviously the title, playing for $5,000 between first and second, the difference on the prize money. You lose game 1. How do you keep your composure in that spot?
I mean, I lost a lot of game ones. I lost a couple game ones throughout the weekend. And it's not the first time I've ever done it. Lost a game one and have come back in a series. So I wasn't like too discouraged or anything by it. Really, I was like, all right, let's go into the next game. I get to go first. And then I was like, well, hopefully this game he draws reasonably. And then I was like, they dead draw like one of every 3 games. So or they draw poorly, like very poorly, one of 3 games. So I was like, maybe game 3 is where it finally catches him, and it did. Like that was actually went through my head. I was like, okay, hopefully he draws fine this game and I beat him, and then hopefully that third game 3 is the game where he draws poorly. And then I mulliganed 4
Yep.
times, and I was like, well, it's not this game. Hopefully hopefully I draw Marnie Path. And every mulligan I had before I drew a basic had Marnie Path. So I was like, okay, like as I was like flip, because I like deal my cards out face down and then I like pick them up one at a time. Every time I was picking them up, I was like, oh, DTE, Path, Marnie, Quick Ball. I was like, this is great. And then I would see no Arceus, no Peak, and I'd be like, okay, going back in, and 4 times in a row, I basically I think 3 of the 4 hands had that combination of cards of, like they didn't always have DT, but they had, like, Quick Ball, Path, Marnie. 3 of the 4 mulligans did, and then the 4th hand was like, "Okay, Arceus, Peak, Research, VMAX, V-Star." I was like, "Okay, it's, like, not bad, but I wish I had a Marnie in this hand because he's gonna get 4 mulligans," and then Radner draws the mulligans, uses Greninja's ability, and goes attach pass, and I'm like, "Okay, I can Marty next turn then. That's fine."
Like, that was absolutely wild, by the way. He starts the game with 11 cards, 6 cards from his opening hand plus his basic Pokemon. So 6 cards in his opening hand, 4 mulligans, draw for turn, 11 cards. Capacious Bucket goes and gets 2 water energies,
Yeah.
concealed cards for 2 more. He sees 13 unique cards on his first turn and finds no basic Pokemon and no out to basic Pokemon. Like, that is ridiculous. Like, that should never happen. And he just goes attach Greninja Pass. You have to have been
Yeah.
like fist pumping mentally, right?
Yeah, I was pretty hype. Well, that still counts. 1 of 3 games they draw poorly, and it was still even though 4 mulligans later, it still worked out. They still drew Radner still drew poorly 1 of 3 games. So I was like, "All right, fine, that's good. I'll take that." Especially after I had like a pretty poor game 1. I was like, or just Radner's had a really good draw in game 1. I was like, "Okay, I'll take that trade off." And then yeah, they were still able to set up pretty well from there. Had the turn 3 attack with the Greninja to get things going. And I had a choice between Boss KO Greninja or Marnie, and I went with the Marnie over the Boss KO Greninja. Looking back on it, Boss KO Greninja might have set me up a little bit better, but I knew if I go probably for the Boss KO on the Greninja, Bradner's gonna have the boss bring up my peak and punch it first. So I didn't really love the idea of taking that trade off, and I was like, they have a huge hand. Who knows what they're gonna be able to set up on this next turn? I kind of don't want to give, Bradner the full. Even if they weren't able to use all those cards on the first turn, that means there's a lot of supporters or cross switchers or this or that in the hand. I was like, Marnie feels like a little bit better here because if I can't Marnie next turn, that's where it could get really bad because I had to Starbirth for the Marnie between Marnie and Boss, and I was like, if I don't get the Marnie now, I might not be able to Marnie next turn. I might have to research instead, and then who knows where the board develops from there for Bradner. So I went the
Yeah.
Marnie immediately, just like limit their options. I know at this point I'm still ahead, and then hopefully I can just keep pulling further and further. And especially after Radner used the keep calling and only got 1 Sobble, I was like, okay, there's like so few basics on board, and because a lot of the ways that Bradner gets the basics into play is Battle VIP Pass. He only uses on the first turn. I was like, if I keep spamming Marnie from here,
He's got
Bradner
4
might just
dead
not be
cards
able
in his
to.
deck. Yeah.
Yeah, and might just not be able to set up a board of a bench full of Pokemon ever in this game and ever take any big 1-hit KO. So I was like, okay, just go with the Marnie, keep trying to pressure with the peaks after, because I knew the Greninja play was probably going to happen on the next turn. That's the turn I was really looking forward towards finding a path to the peak. I was like, I'm going to play this Marnie. Let's find a path. Did not find the path. And I was like, all right, well, no path. Hopefully I don't get too punished for like whiffing the path here and they don't have too big of a turn because of it. But yeah, being able to use like Greninja's ability for free every single turn is scary. So I was really hoping to find paths more aggressively. But besides that, it worked out. So
Yeah, and then things end up going pretty heavily in your favor. You get 2 peaks set up before. I think he like had taken 2 prizes, or well, I don't even remember exactly, but maybe I don't even remember. Did he even take a prize in the 3rd game? I
I
don't
don't
even
think.
remember.
I
It was
think it's
not
possible he didn't know.
because he bossed and hit your peak for like a ton of damage, or not boss, cross switcher hit your peak for a ton of
Yeah.
damage, and was like there that turn he was like 1 combo piece away from just actually
Yeah.
clearing the VMAX off the board, which would have made the game super close. But he doesn't get there and just hits your peak. You go back into Arceus and then you set up another peak. So you've got 2 peaks set up. You go down to just 2 prizes left, and he misses an attack that turn and just
Yeah.
retreats into Manaphy and passes. You don't
Yeah.
have boss right there, but even still, you're going to knock out this Manaphy and go to 1. You have to know I'm a North American International Champion,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I set up double B barrel, double peak, double Arceus. I think like, I just filled my board at that point. It's like it didn't matter. I was like, if I just set up 2 peaks, I just win. So I just went all out, set up 2 peaks. And I was like, yeah, there's nothing. I couldn't think of a route for Bradner to take. I had the Charon's Care in hand, so even if the B barrel got bossed up, I think then I just pick up the Arceus, attach the DT, retreat the Arceus back to a peak, and win the game on the next turn. So yeah, at that point, I pretty much knew it was all over. At first, initially, I was like, I thought it was all over. Maybe once once Bradner had the Greninja pass, but then it started to get a little bit closer on those next couple turns. So it wasn't quite over right then, but yeah, once Bradner whiffed that knockout, I knew it was all done, and I was going to be the champion.
And so you knock out his Manaphy. He looks at his board, realizes he can't win, extends the hand, shakes your hand. You're North American International Champion. you get the title that you, I know, have been fighting for, and it was a really cool moment. I was really happy for you, and I know you had a bunch of friends in the crowd cheering you on, a bunch of people watching at home, all the Rat Pack running thick in the chat, I know, was cheering you on. So it must feel amazing, man. Congratulations. I'm super pumped for you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it does. It does feel great. It feels good to get the big win. Of course, like I said, just looking forward to the next one. Though. Looking forward towards Worlds, and then we're looking forward towards the next season after that.
Always looking ahead. Okay, so let's take a moment to talk a little bit about the meta for NAIC. I think that it shaped up pretty similarly to what most people expected as far as the overall what decks were played. It was pretty heavy into Palkia. One thing I
Yeah.
was really, I mean, maybe not shocked by, but I thought that there would have been a little bit more variety amongst what the top players were playing. But it was like, I think if you looked at the top 16 NA, top 22 Europe, top 8 LA, and top 8 OCIC, or Oceania, sorry. I think if you looked at all of the like day 2 ranked players, it was really heavily skewed towards Palkia. Like pretty much all of those players, like 80+% of those players were playing Palkia, it felt like.
Yeah, except for maybe the Americans, or North America. I feel like they were on the
A
Arcantel. A
little
lot
bit
of them
more of
were.
that, yes.
Pram, Tanner, Kulas, like all of them.
Grant played
Like,
that as well as, and
yeah,
Piper as well played Arceus. So
yeah. So yeah, a lot of the North American players were on Arceus, but it was Inteleon, I guess is what you could say. Like maybe
sure.
almost 100% of those players were playing Inteleon in their decks, which makes sense. Super strong card, but then you have to play up against. It's a very predictable call to know you're just playing up against the mirror match. Inteleon mirror matches all day long. Once you get into the day 2, it was like all Inteleon all the time. But yeah, it did show up. I didn't think it was going to be this popular. I did expect, the crew, the Kulas, Pram, that crew, to run it back. I did expect them to run it back. I didn't expect double Ordinary Rod, double Palpad. That was kind of a surprise. And actually, one of them, Varesco played that list and actually made top 8. So, and there was 3 Arceus. Arceus Intellion had the biggest representation in top 8, right? Of 3, right? Was
It
there
was
3 Palkias?
3 Arcantel, 3 Palkia, and
Okay,
then
so they
the
tied.
Mewtwo, and then you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, it showed up big. It showed up bigger than I thought it would, but I did expect it specifically from that crew. And then I knew some other people, of course, like Piper. Yeah, like you mentioned, Piper played it. Other people would pick it up as well because the deck's still pretty strong. And I think people have found the biggest thing that people have to figure out is just like, how do I beat Palkia? And I think the strategies that people have come up with definitely is solid against Palkia. I still think Palkia is favored in that matchup overall because you get to fill up your bench, whereas the Arceus player has to go like Arceus, Sobble. So like there's a pretty big difference in options when you get to play with 5 bench Pokemon compared to 2.
So yeah, Arceus, Inteleon, and Palkia V-Star definitely the most popular choice of the top players, and I think that is largely on the back of just how strong the Inteleon engine
Yeah.
is. The more I've thought about it, I mean, it was a few months ago. I think it was like a Jake Gearhart tweet where he said it was the best support line in the history of the game. It really just might be. It is kind of ridiculous how
Yeah.
strong it is. And especially now with the addition of Irida. I saw Bradner tweeted after the event like a copy of Irida that literally, as a joke, just said, "This is a crazy card," and it just says do whatever you want because it gives you access to literally your entire deck. You play an Irida, if you have a couple Sobbles in play, you can get any Pokemon, you can get any Stadium, you can get any energy, you can get any supporter, you can get anything out of your deck to set up for future turns.
Yeah. I'm not going to let Bradner get away with that too much, though. Bradner did say at Milwaukee that Irida was
He
terrible,
did. He
a
did.
trash card, and did not run it at all in their Milwaukee list. And I believe only like a couple days before the event decided that, oh, wait, Irida's pretty good. So yeah, Irida is very good in the deck for sure. Bradner is recently a believer in the
A
Irida, though. But yeah,
convert, yes.
yeah, when you combo that with Inteleon, it's just you get everything, and it's not even like you're not even almost like consistently getting that much more than you'd get off like if you just played a research for turn, but you're getting it right as long as you like have basic Pokemon. Like that's the only thing that's scary that can happen, and that's where I walked away with a lot of really easy dubs against Palkia is when they would go like Palkia Pass. On following up with Irida to a Palkia Pass is not very
Yes.
good,
No,
but
not at all.
if you get like 2 or 3 basic Pokemon or a Battle VIP pass on your first turn, or Irida for Battle VIP pass, your follow-up Iridas basically guarantee you what you would want for like a perfect turn on every following turn from there. So it's pretty powerful once you've established like some even just a couple basic Pokemon. It's pretty crazy for sure.
One of the best supporters fits just super nicely with the best deck. Okay, so we've got the Palkia, we've got the Arceus, and then kind of the big surprise, something nobody would have expected. Good old Mewtwo V Union. So there's a few players on this deck. I believe most of the deck actually came from Mace, who
Yeah.
he was kind of like the one that was like, okay, this concept is really good. And obviously, Sander, one of the best control players, I'm sure he was really drawn to it. They're both from the Netherlands, so I'm sure they talked a little bit and figured out what they wanted to play. And then I think a couple American players were on it as well, Dean Nazam and Britt Pybus. Dean made day two. I think Britt just missed out, excuse me, on day two, though, was like maybe lost the win and in. I don't remember 100%, but yeah, Mewtwo v Union. So I know that it was a big surprise for me. Like as a caster, we're always out there trying to find like what unique decks players brought. We see a V Union in play. That's obviously gonna raise alarm bells. As something like, okay, we got to try to see if we can figure out a way to get this on, and it did get on in round number two. But yeah, so as a player though, did you hear about like rumblings? Sometimes like the secret deck or whatever for an event will get out the night before and like someone leaks and you hear a little bit of like, okay, did you hear that they're playing this stall deck? Was there anything like that for you or your group that you played the Flying Pikachu deck with, or like how and what was it like in the early rounds as well of like trying to figure out what's going on in this list?
Yeah, I mean, we heard pretty early and we of course everyone knows it as Sanders deck, and like everyone's gonna be like, oh, Sanders playing Mewtwo V Union. But yeah, Mies was, I believe, the one who came up with the Mewtwo V Union is a really good Pokemon right now that can't be KO'd and heals 200 damage off itself. So it's kind of like an infinitely stalling Pokemon there. I'm sure Sander, if they didn't have come up or if Mies didn't find the Mewtwo V Union, I'm sure Sander would have played some kind of Miltank stall type deck, of course. But yeah, we heard about it. Of course, we all heard about it as Mises deck or as Sanders deck. And we were like, all right, well, what does it do? And they was like, well, it just heals 200 damage every turn. And we're like, oh, that's pretty good. And so for us, like for my crew specifically, we are like, oh, we have Crobat VMAX. We want to KO it. So my initial game plan, what we talked about is like, if you hit them, we didn't fully know what was in the list. We're like, if you hit them, all you have to do is because to like turbo through their list, they have to play Snorlax, so they can't hold their Crushing Hammer. So I was like, okay, all we have to do then is just sit there and draw Trinity Nova over and over again. And then when they bring the Mewtwo V Union in play, you go Marnie and then load up all the energy on the Crobat and then want to KO the Mewtwo on the next turn. But there was Miltanks in there, of course, so that made things a little bit trickier. We did have Phoebe, and yeah, Mewtwo wasn't even like because Caleb played against Sander, I believe, in round like 4 or 5, and Caleb was just like, they don't even use the Mewtwo in the matchup. They don't even need it. You just like they just Miltank, and it's like. And Caleb almost beat Sander, I believe, in game 2 of their set, lost game 1, and was just like, yeah, if you just be aggressive, you just start attacking, and then whenever you find Phoebe, play Phoebe, KO a Miltank. It seems like it's pretty close. And, after playing against Sander twice and taking a game each time, yeah, that's basically, if I didn't have the Phoebe, I would definitely lose. But with the Phoebe, just enough to kind of get through and put the pressure on consistently enough to try and get 6 prize cards and at least a game in a set. So, yeah,
So yeah,
that's what happened for at least my crew when we heard about the deck.
so I just want to talk about kind of the concept of the deck a little bit. I've got it pulled up on the screen for anyone watching on YouTube, but if you are listening, just exactly how it works. Of course, Mewtwo V Unions, big HP, 310, very difficult to KO. It is weak to dark, and darkness type Pokemon aren't as popular as they were, with Mew VMAX's decline. There's not really Hoopas running around. Crobat VMAX really only in Azul's deck, and not even every Flying Pikachu was playing Crobat VMAX. We had people playing
Yep.
Hisuian, Decidueye, and Beedrill as well for this event, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So big HP, can't really get KO'd easily. It does pretty well against Arceus and Palkia decks, it feels like, because they have a clear damage cap. You just heal the damage, and then what you can also do is play Avery to limit against Palkia. You limit their bench, so you're limiting their damage output, and then you eventually get to a turn where you play Cook to heal 70 damage, so you don't have to heal the full 200. We actually saw Sander do this on stream against Justin Bakari, where he went Cook, healed a bunch of damage, went down to like 50 left, knew that there's no way Justin can KO him, and then he uses Mewtwo's final burn attack, which just deals 300 damage and knocks out the Palkia and starts to take prize cards and eventually wins by taking prizes. Now, they did end up tying that game. It was round 3 on stream, and Sander just opened like a dead hand game one, and Justin ended up getting a pretty crazy turn with like Zigzagoons plus he got like Zigzagoons, Nets, plus Radiant Greninja to KO an Yveltal and Meowth in play. The only two Pokemon Sander had, and ended up winning the game. So it was also funny. I talked to Justin after that game, and I was asking him, like, did you know what any of these things did? And he was like, I had no idea what was going on. He said he had this chef card. I had to figure out what the chef did, talking about Cook. And he said he thought that when the Mewtwo came into play that it just put 3 energies on itself. He was like, this card is broken. Why has nobody played this before? Didn't quite realize exactly like how it went. But yeah, obviously, I mean, he ends up winning a game and takes a tie in what would be otherwise an unfavorable matchup. Mewtwo V Union feels pretty good against Arceus and Palkia.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, that's like something we were trying to figure out as well. It's like, how did they get the energy on the Mewtwo? We were like theorizing they had to play Raihan the turn they put it into play, but we forgot about the
Union gain.
energy, yeah, the Union gain attack to get the energy. And then once we figured that out, we're like, oh, this deck is just sick because you just like put it down, net your active, send it up, attach energy, attack, get 2 energy on it, and then when you get hit, you heal, you hit, you heal, and repeat. And then of course the final part of the deck that is super important is the infinite loop or
Yes.
almost infinite loop of Team Yell's Cheer, Palpad,
Infinite
and
loop asterisk.
yeah, and what's the other card?
Silene.
Silene. So you can Team Yell's Cheer to put Silenes plus whatever other supporters you want. Avery's team, was it Flare Grunt? Not Flare Grunt. What is it? The one called?
Flannery.
Flanneries, whatever you need to like get for the situation. Maybe the Cook, put those back in your deck, and then you can use Silene to put back Palpad. And if you get 2 heads, you can put back Palpad plus Palpad, and then the Palpad could get you Silene plus Team Yell's Cheer, and then you can Team Yell's Cheer for Silene. And so there's like you can loop between Team Yell's Cheer and Silene basically. Or you could just like Silene loop Palpad if you wanted to as well. You don't even need to get the Team Yell's Cheer involved, but the Team Yell's Cheer is a lot more like safe.
Yes.
You're like it takes away a lot of the variance of the
yeah, I
flipping
think
coins
the
of
Team Yell's
Silene.
Cheer is like necessary for because it's an infinite asterisk, like I said, because you could just flip a bunch of tails, which will
Yeah.
happen in Pokemon. And so the Team Yell's Cheer makes it so you have to flip even more tails for yourself to ever deck out. And we actually almost saw Sander deck out against you in top 4. Where he flipped a ton of tails in game 1, like a ton of tails. And it came down to it, but he ended up getting the last clutch heads, puts the Palpad back, and then Palpad gets Silene and Yell's cheering, and then it's like, okay, he's even more turns away. I think it's like 20 tails in a row or something like that is necessary for you to actually deck out with the deck.
I think me said I think Mies maybe said 8. 8 is like the number.
Oh, okay.
Like depending on how the situations develop, like 8 would be the number you'd have to get in a row or something. But even then, you're not like guaranteed to lose. I don't know. It's a lot. It's basically infinite for like this for a tournament, even with 15 rounds in it, best 2 out of 3. Throughout all those games, you're very unlikely to ever deck yourself by hitting tails, right? Like you're pretty safe in a tournament. You know, you have to get pretty unlucky. And if the deck is as good as it is, then you could still manage to take a loss, right? Like Sander didn't lose any games. And I know one of the losses that Mies ran into was against Grant, where Mies messed up and put too many energy in play, and then Grant came through with a Starmie and one hit KO'd the Mewtwo. So, yeah, when played very, very well, the deck seems, unless it's teched against. I mean, it's Mies and Sander and them who put the time in on the deck definitely had the deck of the tournament for sure. They had the best deck in the tournament. I don't even think it's like debatable or close. It didn't win, but like if you ask anyone, they definitely had the deck of the tournament. And I was only barely able to squeak out that win against Sander because I just had a Phoebe for Miltank in the Blissey, right? If I had played the Shauna instead or just like was like, all right, screw it, I don't care about beating Blissey Miltank. And I just want to have had an answer for Sanders. So very conveniently, I had the Phoebe in there to give me a chance, even just a chance, right? It's not like an auto win because I have the Phoebe. So definitely had the deck of the tournament for sure.
Yeah, congratulations to them on the finish. All of them did pretty, both Mies and Sander did pretty well. I think Dean was like outside the top 32. I think he still get top 64 though. But yeah, very cool deck, absolutely. You mentioned that this is the type of deck that if people aren't teching for, it's really good, but once it's a known quantity, it becomes a little bit easier to manage because it is very much like you can tech for it, right? Like, or you can play a deck that beats this. If you play something like a like the Dark Intellion deck, and you've got like Galarian Moltres V in there, you're gonna do pretty good against this deck. It feels like, you know, you've got solid answers to Miltank. You can one shot the Mewtwo V Union. I don't know, where, how do you think the format develops as far as like respecting this deck? It's definitely, as far as like online tournaments go, it's probably worth respecting this deck for a little bit, right?
Yeah, probably, and maybe even pass that as well headed into Worlds. We've got a lot of time. One of the things to think about as well is, are people going to forget about this deck going into Worlds? Because that's
How
something that
could
happens
they?
sometimes. Is people
How
sometimes
could
just
they though?
forget that decks exist and are like, well, why would I worry about that deck? Or like maybe they'll think about it for a second, but no, but nobody plays that right now. And then all of a sudden, it pops up because the deck is better than people thought. I think Arkintel was a good example of that, not for just this tournament, but also Milwaukee. It's like, oh wait, this is a deck. Or even Arceus Dorado on that one Milwaukee, right? Oh, this is still a deck, right? And no one was respecting that deck at all going into Milwaukee. And this is one of those decks that's not going to be that heavily played, even if people are respecting it. So it's like, do you really want to commit deck space to be able to beat it? And then I don't know how good the techs are at beating this. I feel like the deck that I played, between the Crobat and the Phoebe, you put yourself in a pretty good spot. But I don't actually know what Palkia decks or Arceus and Teleon decks could do to give themselves a favorable matchup up against the Mewtwo. There's definitely some testing to be done or some research to be done. I'm sure there's cards out there that put you in a pretty good spot. Even just a card that would like mill cards from your opponent's deck is pretty annoying. Sanders said they were scared of playing against the water box deck with the Crabominable that just mills too. Like that sounds really annoying to play against. You could just like
Yeah.
turbo, you could just aggro Crabominable probably in that matchup and you'd beat the Mewtwo deck because you have so many cards you don't want to get discarded. And then when you get down to the bottom of your deck and you're using the Team Yell's Cheer Silene stuff, if they're discarding two of those cards every time, you're going to be in trouble probably. So there's definitely some cards that will, that'd be pretty good against it. But I don't know if anything quite gives it like what gives you like an auto win against the deck, especially for the big decks like the big Inteleon decks.
So one deck we definitely need to talk about, which it was still pretty popular, but it almost feels like it's been pushed out a bit from the meta. A very low percentage of like top level players were playing it, it feels like, and that is Mew VMAX. Um, is that a testament to just like the consistency of the Intellion engine? People wanted to stick with a deck that they knew they'd be able to play the game a higher percentage of the time, or I don't know, like are people just like a little down on it, a little unfavorable for it? Because there's not that many like hard Mew counters out there right now. There's less Path to the Peak index. There's less Darkness type Pokemon running around. What led to Mew VMAX's lack of a top 8 spot and lack of deck choice by really good players?
I mean, I feel like it's like a deck that less and less good players are just choosing to play because you just have, I mean, less control over the games. I don't want to say Mew plays like less games overall than like the Arcantels and Palcantels because they also have their bad openings as well. But you can definitely it's easier to make a comeback from a dead draw with a Palkia or an Arc deck than it is with Mew. Because if you just go like open Genesect Pass, it's so hard to reestablish a board state. Whereas an Arceus or a Palk deck, they can be swinging on the next turn with an Arceus or a Palkia potentially and be just fine. But you can't really do that with a Mew deck. So I think it's just people, yeah, like myself, more people are coming to terms with that. It is a very powerful deck, still very good, but it's just not worth. Like, if you consider yourself a good player, it's really hard for you to give yourself an edge by continuing to play the deck, you know, over something else. It's just you just know there's no edge to be gained. Everyone knows about the deck. Everyone has a strategy against the deck. Everyone's deck is prepared to beat it. Like, and then on top of that, it's not like you can tech it out or play a bunch of things that make it really easy for you to all of a sudden overcome all of these obstacles. And it actually is currently a deck where I'm thinking is like maybe it is a deck that people will kind of forget going into Worlds, right? Because if all the best players in the world just aren't playing it, that's going to be a majority of the people who are
Don't be
playing,
tempted,
day
Azul.
two of
Don't go
Worlds.
back. Don't go back. You finally got away.
So I could see it becoming a deck that people forget about for Worlds. I mean, I think a good indication of that will be how many are in day one and how they do in day one. So day one of Worlds, I definitely expect Mew to be a factor, but I'm more so thinking about kind of day two of Worlds where, all of the best players who have their day two invites already just have not been playing Mew VMAX. Most of them have just been choosing not to play Mew VMAX this whole time. I played it a bit. Tord played it for that first event. Natalie played it to get a win, but since then has kind of put it away. Like, and I don't expect all of a sudden any of them to kind of pick it back up. So its factor into going to Worlds will definitely just be how well it does in day one, I think. But it does feel like a deck that people are kind of almost for the best because it's definitely one of those decks that no one still enjoys going up against. Like no one wants to
Right.
play against Mew, so it's almost for the best that maybe just the community as a whole can just kind of let Mew go and just no one plays it anymore.
So something we should mention for sure is the lack of Blissey and Duraludon in the top 32 because those were the first and second place decks at Milwaukee just a couple weeks ago. There were still quite a few Blissey running around, several in top 64, a couple Arceus Duraludons in day 2 as well, but it just didn't really perform as maybe highly as people would have thought coming off of such a good performance in Milwaukee. So, I don't know. What are your kind of thoughts on why it underperformed a little bit? I do still think the Blissey deck is really good, but Arceus Duraludon, it's almost like people respected it a little bit more. You know, we saw Echoing Horn in a lot of the Palkia lists as a way to just boost your damage a bit more. And then people also like, I think people were on the fence for Milwaukee about playing Starmie or not, which is really good
Yeah.
against Blissey. And Starmie was in a lot of decks. It was in a lot of Palkia decks and also a lot of Arceus Intellion decks.
Yeah, so I think Blissey is easier to I think Duraludon's just not that good of a deck. I think it's okay. I think the Eldegoss from Braden probably got them a ton of wins in a lot of situations where people just didn't expect like aggressive plays with Boss or whatever. So I think, eh, yeah, the deck is definitely, and also like the matchup, like Arceus Intellion becoming more popular is also pretty bad for Arceus Duraludon. That's actually one of the reasons I was kind of surprised that Arceus Duraludon was able to win Milwaukee was that crew of players coming through with Arceus Intellion and doing really, really well at Milwaukee because that matchup's just not good for Arceus Duraludon. Like Arceus Duraludon also struggles against Arceus B Barrel. Like I beat two of them really handedly in Milwaukee myself. Like Sharon's Care is just hard to deal with. Like you have your hyper potions, but it's so much harder for you to find your hyper potions than it is for the other Arceus decks to just find a Sharon's Care and reset off the Sharon's Care. So yeah, Arceus Duraludon, I still just like feel like I don't want to call it a fluke that it won Milwaukee. But like it definitely was like one of those things where like if you run that tournament back, I don't think Arceus Duraludon's getting close. I don't think you'll see two in the top 8 for sure that we had in Milwaukee. So yeah, I think it was a little bit more just kind of right time, right moment for Arceus Duraludon. For Blissey, I think Blissey just like yeah, the Starmie showed up. I think it's just kind of unfortunate for Blissey. Like I think Blissey is still a really really good deck, but it's really hard to deal with Starmie. You can sit there and just put 4 energy on your Blissey, but you lose so much of your win percentage of Blissey because you had so many games. There's so many games with Blissey where you just win because you just ramped out a massive Blissey
Yeah.
from like turn 2 on, and you just have like a Blissey with 9 energy on turn 3, just swinging, and then they hit it and you heal it and then you 1-hit KO and you just like ramp through the rest of the game. So not being able to do that because everyone plays Starmie all of a sudden like makes the deck lose a lot of its win percentage. So I think that was like it's kind of unfortunate for Blissey that Starmie really showed up big.
So, is there anything else in the top 32 or like in the day 2 field, I guess, in general, that really stood out to you? Anything that you maybe even maybe something you played in day 1 that like someone was doing pretty decently with that was something you wouldn't have expected? I know there was a couple weird decks in day 2. There was the Turbo Dialga deck. Xander Perot ended up bubbling at top 64, got 65th place with the Dialga V Star. There was a couple. There was like a Hisuian Samurott or 2 in day 2, I think, but neither of them did
Yeah.
super great. I don't know. Was there anything else that stood out to you as a really cool deck?
Not really. Nothing that actually ended up getting towards the. I didn't really see anything that ended up getting towards the top table. I wasn't paying too much attention to the rest of what was going on. I was just like kind of because I was at table 1 for most of the tournament. I was kind of just looking at like what was going
I
on
was
up
at
at that
table 1
upper
for most of the tournament. Oh,
up
okay.
at the upper half of the table. So I didn't check out too much of what was happening in day 2, but yeah, nothing too surprising. I mean, yeah, Arceus Intellion and Arceus Palkia, I think were just by far the two most
Well, there
popular
was
decks in
that
day 2.
really cool like bird box deck that 2 people got top
Oh yeah,
32 with. That deck was pretty cool. I think it was 2 brothers actually getting both of them top 32 with a Vikavolt Galarian Moltres V deck.
yeah, that deck. I sat next to one of them actually in the last round. Yeah, and it was like it seemed like the point of the deck was like to turn 1 just attack with Weak Vault, and then was like, okay, from here we'll see how much pressure or how much how much damage is that doing to their current setup, and then kind of evaluate and go from there because you can go with the big attack from the Vika Vault. They had the Moltres in there. I think they played a 1/1 Palkia in there as well. Just another way to accelerate energy.
There's no
Um,
Palkia.
there's no Palkia. Oh, okay, maybe I saw a different list than that had the Vika Vault
Yeah,
plus
there was a guy
Palkia
who
in there.
played a Palkia Vikavolt deck in Milwaukee, and I know that's a
Yeah.
deck that's like kind of existed in Japan a little bit, but
Yeah, it's kind of like the Turbo Palkia, but then you have like a Vika Vault in there and a Raikou. It's like sometimes people play the Raikou in there
yeah.
as well, and that's actually like super helpful going up against Palkia and Teleon because that lets you win the back and forth a lot easier. Because one of Turbo Palkia's struggles against Palkia and Teleon is like they KO both your Palkias. Now you can't even KO anything anymore. But you just put a Raikou in there, and then you have 2 V-Stars and the Raikou to kind of over like the Suicune, and you have the Raikou in there instead to kind of give you that edge. So yeah, but it wasn't anything too crazy. Like I think I mean, it's hard to compare anything to the deck that Sander and Mies played as far as crazy goes. So it's like nothing else is really crazy compared to that. But yeah, the Vika Vault decks were cool though for sure. The 2 Vika Vault decks that made up top 32. Definitely a deck I'm going to be trying out this week
Same.
on stream and stuff.
Yeah, definitely a cool one. Okay, well, as we move on from NAIC, it's definitely something that people are going to be keeping in mind as we move to the World Championships, even though we have the new Pokemon Go set. And there are a lot of cool cards. The meta will still be very heavily impacted by the results of NAIC, which the results are pretty heavily leaning towards Palkia and Arceus and Teleon. Obviously, you won with the Pikachu VMAX, so people will consider that, but I feel like it's more beneficial to people to think about the decks that were most played, which was Arceus and Teleon and Palkia.
Definitely for sure. That's going to be the big decks to worry about. And then I think Mew's always going to be a factor. You got to like keep Mew in the back of your mind. You can't. I think we could. I feel like the meta could get to a point where everyone like forgets about Mew.
People start to forget about Mew, right?
Yeah, I mean, but as long as the decks like it seems like Palkia and Arceus and Teleon just naturally are the way the lists are developing, almost going away from trying to hard beat Mew, just are still naturally beating Mew enough of the time. So it does make it very hard to want to pick up Mew and be like, no one's playing dark stuff anymore. It's like, we still have Roxanne Path. We don't need to play dark stuff. It's like, okay, I guess I just can't play Mew anymore, right? So yeah, it feels like I think there's only one Mew. I'm actually looking at it now. There's only one Mew in top 32.
Yeah.
Of the and a Mew is probably the most popular deck at the tournament. I guess Palkia and Teleon maybe was, but Mew is second most popular deck at the tournament overall, probably, right? So yeah, we'll see how it goes from here. But yeah, don't forget about Mew fully. You don't want to forget about it fully, but yeah, it's probably not going to be as big of a deal as the Inteleon decks going forwards. But that was NAIC. It's a great tournament. Super fun to play and win. Chip, I know you had a good time casting it, but now we're going to get to everyone's favorite segment, guess that flavor text, and I'm picking this time, picking the card for Chip. I'm picking a card. I'm going to read the flavor text, and Chip has to try and guess which Pokemon it is. Not like specifically what set it is or the set number, just the name of the Pokemon. So I'm going to read the flavor text here in a second. The other part of this game that we have is we have 3 lifelines, and Chip at any point can ask for one of these lifelines. And we'll receive 1 less point though. So if Chip gets it right without using any lifelines, Chip will get 4 points. If they use if Chip uses 1 lifelines, 3 points, 2 points, 1 point. And the lifelines are what set the card is from, what stage the card is, and then read an attack name on the card. So are you ready, Chip?
I am so ready. All right, Flying Pikachu from Evolution. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
All right. When they see an enemy, their tails stand high, and they spit the seeds of berries stored in their cheek pouches.
I mean, I feel like this is either Squavette or Greedent. I will say, what stage is the card?
It is a stage 1.
I mean, it's just gotta be Greedent, right? Like, it's like the cheek pouch Pokemon, I'm pretty sure, is like the actual designation. Read me the flavor text one more time.
When they see an enemy, their tails stand high, and they spit the seeds of berries stored in their cheek pouches.
It's just gotta be Greedent, man. He also has a massive tail. It's like taller than his head. I'm going Greedent all day. You gave me a layup this week.
You locking it in?
Locking it in.
It is not Greedent.
No! Come on! There's no way! There's no way! What Pokemon? How?
Watchog.
Watchog? Watchog?
You guess which Watchog it is?
Bro, I don't care. Is it from like Emerging Powers or something like that?
Yes, it is the Emerging Powers Watchog, the one that Grant was looking for this weekend to play in GLC, or last weekend maybe. It has the watch check attack. Look at the top 5 card of your opponent's deck and put them back in.
Bro, he doesn't even have a tail.
In any order. I think he has 2 tails. It says their tails stand high. I thought you were gonna maybe get it on that. I thought you were gonna maybe get it on that when I reread it and be like, wait, Greedent has 1 tail.
Watchog also only has 1 tail.
Do they? Because it says when they see an enemy, their tails stand high. So that's like, do they have multiple? In the picture, you can't. I can only see 1 tail.
Sure. Yeah. Look at any other Watchog card.
Okay, maybe.
I think it's meant to be like when they like the
Yeah,
multiple Watchhogs because
yeah.
it's like a pack Pokemon. I'm pretty sure, dude. There's just no shot. No shot. Watchhog from Emerging Powers.
Yep,
Dang, and
that
if I
was
had
it.
just asked, I went for the 3 points. I thought you gave me a layup this week.
No shot. Yeah, if you had asked for an attack name, I would have gone with Quick Tail Smash, and then I would have
I
given
mean,
you
if
a
I had asked what set it was from, I would have known it wasn't Greedent because Greedent
yeah,
didn't exist when Emerging Powers
yeah,
came
that's
out.
true. What would you have guessed
No.
though at that point? If you knew it was Emerging Powers, where would you even go from there?
I don't think I was ever getting to Watchhog, to be honest. But maybe, I don't know. Maybe with the relevance of Grant feverishly looking for this card last week, I would have gotten there. But jeez, man. Jeez. All
All right,
right. Another
so
0-pointer. That's okay.
another 0 pointer. A couple other interesting things happened at NAIC. The first one was and this is one actually probably everyone's heard about, but also everyone outside of Pokemon has probably heard about, or at least if you're like in gaming, follow some gaming people on Twitter, IGN, whatever. Someone showed up with a deck of jumbo cards, like the big cards that you get from like the products, like the one I have, the one I can remember off the top of my head that I have is the V Union one, Pikachu V Union jumbo card. Those cards. Someone showed up with a deck of 60 of them,
I
and
actually don't think the V Union cards would have been acceptable for this deck because it's four
we talk about that.
cards.
I talked about that with someone, but no, but it is one card.
But it's 4 cards. It has 4 set numbers on one card. So you
Oh,
wouldn't
does it
be.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe it had its own set number thing.
No, no. But yes, 4 jumbo cards. Yeah, there's a bunch of different jumbos. I've got Cramorant V here. Like,
Yeah.
it's just these big cards like this. There are no energies, no trainer cards. This guy purely did it for the meme. And this went pretty viral on Twitter as well. Joshua Yell from IGN tweeted it out. This madman entered the Pokemon TCG North American International Championship with a 60-card deck made purely of novelty jumbo cards. The judges debated and ruled it was legal because card size is not specified in the rules. And this tweet has 197,000 likes on Twitter, which is wild. Pokemon TCG stuff does not go this viral.
No, never. It was actually pretty. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I didn't see them at the event, so I didn't get to actually see it in action, see them play out a game of Pokemon. But yeah, they can't win. They don't do it there. They can't attack. There's no energy. I don't even know if maybe one of the jumbo cards has an attack with 0 energy on it. But yeah, there's no way for them to ever win a game of Pokemon. They just sat down, looked over their Pokemon, let them all get knocked out, and then lose. I don't even know if they ever completed like a full game, maybe a couple. But at some point, I'm sure it'd get a little bit boring to sit there and just have your jumbo cards get knocked out over and over. But I'm sure going forwards, there will be a rule that states you can't use, abnormally sized cards. You can't use the jumbo cards going forwards. I'm sure they're going to make a rule covering that going forwards.
Big shout outs to Matthew Verive, who is the player who did this, an absolute legend, a meme lord, legend status in the Pokemon TCG. There is a thread here on Twitter we can go through just really quickly. For those curious, first off, it starts off with, "It is time." And he just tweeted a picture of his playmat with the jumbo card deck set up, ready to draw the opening hand. The picture that went viral from Joshua's tweet is pretty hilarious. Just sitting there holding 3 jumbo cards with a bunch of benched Pokemon and active, 6 prize cards off to the side because they won't fit on the playmat. Pretty outrageous. Yeah, we'll just follow the thread really quickly before we move on. For those curious, I lost game 1. Nobody surprised. My opponent scooped game 2 just to force a game 3 for funsies, and then I got deck checked between game 2 and game 3, and says, after what was probably the longest deck check I've ever witnessed, the deck was returned with the, quote, "We're still not sure if this is playable, but finish up the round and talk to us afterwards." I lost game 3 and then dropped as I had intended to, no matter what. So Matthew really did commit to the bit, was here for the memes. You love to see it. And it then followed up as well. Talked to the judging staff afterwards. And if I didn't drop, I might have received a DQ for marked cards. The oversized cards aren't cut as high standard as regular cards, so some cards could understandably be identified. And then he also tweeted out his deck list, which, it's a pretty wild one. 4 Pikachu V, a 4/4 Eternatus V Max, a 2/4 Snorlax V Max, it looks like. And then just an 0/4 Meowth V Max. It's pretty it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Legendary status regardless.
Yeah, definitely a good meme. It was definitely funny to see. And yeah, they're definitely gonna have to hard rule on no jumbo cards from here on out. But I didn't even like think about that before. I was like, yeah, I mean, who does think of that? What if I just showed up with 60 jumbo cards? Because obviously, some jumbo, some non-jumbo, that would just be marked cards,
Right. It
for
has to be
sure.
60 of the same, for sure.
Yeah.
But I will say, just to add to this, Christopher Szymanski, who was the head judge for the Masters this weekend, the Masters division of the Pokemon TCG, he did tweet out yesterday and said, also, despite the esports blogger who ran hard with the claim that the oversized cards were, quote, confirmed to be legal or whatever, the NAIC ruling I'm most able to comment on is this one, probably a firm no. We didn't get a full answer before Matthew dropped. So probably would not have been allowed. I heard someone joking saying that it was like the Air Bud rule, right? Where the rules don't say you can't have a dog on your team, so let's let the dog play. Which is a pretty good comparison, honestly.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's kind of just like a common sense thing of like, don't show up to a Pokemon tournament with a deck of 60 jumbo cards. It is not legal.
We don't have the right to rule. It's not legal.
The original jumbo cards did have a little bit of text on the back that said these are not tournament legal, and those haven't been on the cards for a long time. So I almost wonder if they'll add that back now. Maybe, I don't know. Who knows?
Maybe just to be safe, that's what they'll do as a precaution. It makes sense. Just make sure no more memers can come through. Although it's good publicity for the game, right? Like it's not a bad thing.
I mean, the fact that 200,000 people liked that tweet and probably 1 million people saw it, like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. So yeah, it's not bad for the game. Maybe we should let a couple more people play with their jumbo cards just for the clout.
We should just let them scoop and get all the way to the finals. Like everyone's get 2 people into the tournament. Everyone just scoop them into the finals.
Yeah, that would work. That'd be worth it.
Okay, so moving on, though, from that, another big thing that went down at the North American International Championships this weekend was there was a few different disqualifications that actually took place for various different reasons. One of them I know had to do with a deck check issue, which to me, someone being DQ'd during deck check, like it has to have been pretty severe where it was like an unfair advantage was likely gained,
Yeah.
Because normally it's just like, oh, we'll have you resleeve or replace the damaged sleeves, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to have been something like the cards. I mean, it would have to have been a lot of cards that were out of order or out of sorts. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it was there was a difference in the deck between the deck list and the deck they were playing, or if it was a difference, or the sleeves were marked, or but yeah, it would have to be pretty severe because usually it is game loss / match loss, I believe, and then you either get basic energy for the cards that you were playing that weren't on your deck list, or you have to re-sleeve or something. So for it to be a DQ is definitely surprising, I would say, for sure. For just like a deck check to DQ, it definitely doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
For sure.
And the player that this happened to was actually a former world champion, 2017 world champion Diego Casiraga. So I don't know what the whole situation was there. I actually spoke to Diego at the end of the night on Friday, and he was with his whole family there at the event. He had like his kids there as well, traveling from Brazil. And he just I didn't like get everything, like the whole story, because it was like we were trying to catch an Uber, they were trying to catch an Uber. I just kind of saw him and was like, oh, how did you do? I didn't actually realize that he was the player who had been DQ'd at the time. And he told me kind of what happened just really quickly, like, some issue with the deck check, and like I didn't get the full story pretty much. That was all that I can say.
Yeah. Thankfully, hopefully, it's nothing like too bad because you're still in the venue. I saw him at the venue on Sunday. So.
Right, and usually if it's like a DQ for cheating, like that person's not going to be allowed back into the tournament.
Yeah, you're not allowed back in the venue at that point. So,
And then another DQ took place. I don't actually remember the player's name. He was someone we had on stream, but I think a lot of people thought that it had to do with something to do with him declumping on stream. And as far as I
Yeah.
understand, a disqualification was totally separate from that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I heard, so take this with like, whatever, that, they just like admitted to, cutting their opponent's deck based on them seeing the bottom card of the deck. So I don't know if that was it or if it was something else. But yeah, declumping on stream, like declumping is something that doesn't do anything, but people still do it. And it's like, yeah, that wouldn't be a reason to DQ someone unless they were like insufficiently shuffling after they were
After
declumping.
declumping, yeah.
But it was on stream, so I'm sure the jujudges were, very much paying attention to what was going on with that. So,
But
yeah,
also,
that's what.
let's clarify: don't declump
Oh
because
yeah,
it just wastes time.
yeah, don't declump, but like, yeah, just don't declump.
That's all there is to it. It's just a
Yeah,
waste
and
of
that's coming
time.
from someone who I used to declump when I first started playing the game because I didn't know any better,
Right.
about full randomization and all that. I'd still make sure I was always taught to, riffle or mash shuffle, 7 times and then give it to your opponent to cut. But I had no understanding of like, declumping did absolutely nothing. But as soon as I figured out that declumping doesn't do anything, I'm like, oh, okay, well, so it's just a waste of time. Why would I do this? I
And I
stopped,
guess also we could talk about real
declumping.
quick Isaiah because it was a big conversation on Twitter about in Isaiah's stream game. Something that he started to do was during his first deck search, he pulled all of the Pokemon in his deck up to the front of his deck to just check his prizes more quickly. And I would say that actually probably saves time because it lets you check
Yeah,
a lot more efficiently. And then he would mash them into his deck and then shuffle his deck afterwards very sufficiently. So, I mean, no cause to think cheating. And that's also, I would say, slightly different than declumping. The first time I remember seeing a player do that was actually Igor doing it on stream at 2017 in AIC when he got top four. He was playing
yeah,
Decidueye, so another, deck that had a very thick Pokemon line. It's really important. In that deck specifically, where you have a 4-4-4 line of your Decidueye, you got to know
yeah.
if you've got a Dartrix prized, right? So he would check that really quickly and then shuffle afterwards, and it was no issue. So I think like that. I mean, that's honestly something I could see a lot of more players implementing into their first deck
Yeah.
search, which I that could bring up some issues because then you open up the door to like people who could try to use it maliciously and attempt to stack. But if you see your opponent doing that, don't automatically think that they're cheating. But if you see your opponent doing that and then they shuffle like 3 times, um, shuffle their deck and then maybe call a judge.
Yeah. Yeah, so it is effectively declumping, but it's declumping with a purpose. When people see like 3 DCE together in their deck and they spread them out, there's no purpose to that declumping besides wasting time. Because once you riffle shuffle or mash shuffle 8 times and then offer it to your opponent to cut, there's a chance that the 3 DCE will still just be right next to each other again, right? So the point of what Bradner does with the declumping is to literally just check prize cards as fast as possible to not waste time. So it's like out of respect for the competition and their opponent that they're trying to, make sure they can get a sufficient amount of time or sufficient amount of games in, right, with the time, right? They're just trying to be respectful to the competition more so than anything, right? They're not trying to, take that extra 30 seconds to a minute to check prize cards. Just throw all the Pokemon to the front, check them real fast, check the prize cards that much faster, shuffle the deck up, and then your deck is once again sufficiently randomized, and it doesn't matter that you did it before. So it's declumping with a purpose, right? Which makes sense. And I'll probably start to try and do that myself as well. It's just a faster way to check prize cards. I've never thought about it before. I've never seen anyone do it besides Bradner. I saw Bradner do it on the EUIC stream. But yeah, definitely not. And actually, I was super surprised by how many players who have been in the game for a while who thought what Bradner did was illegal. I was like, no, it's not. And I was super surprised by some of the names of people on Twitter who were like, wait, I thought that was illegal. So that actually shocked me a little bit for people who have been in the game for a long time. Like declumping is technically not illegal, but declumping without a purpose, like what Bradner does, makes zero sense to ever do besides waste time. So don't declump unless you're doing what Bradner does. Is the only way it ever makes sense to declump.
And then the final of the 3 DQs that took place, definitely the most talked about one, was something that occurred in round number 2, where, allegedly, apparently, we can't say for certain because we were not there, but obviously something happened because this player ended up getting disqualified. Allegedly, Zachary Cooper palmed a boss's orders from his discard pile into his hand during a discard pile search. And this is not the first time that Zach has been accused or caught doing this. I believe there was a very similar instance at an Oceania International Championships in 2017, I think, or maybe it took
Yeah,
place in
the second one.
2016. Okay, so the second one, 2017 or 18, whatever, where he did the same thing with a double colorless energy, and Joe Rudiger caught him doing that. So, yeah, kind of, maybe something some people weren't as surprised to hear, but Zach was disqualified from the event. Zach has had a very good season thus far. He's made top 8 at multiple regional championships, and anytime someone gets disqualified from an event for something like this, which, if it is true, it is blatant cheating, he should be disqualified. And if this is his multiple offense, he maybe should receive a ban. I shouldn't say maybe, but he should receive a ban for, egregiously trying to put a card from his discard pile into his hand. Yeah, man. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of suspect to see that happen after someone's done so well all season.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sucks. You always want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and of course, Zach has had that past that you mentioned. The specific incidents being the OCIC. So I mean, you always want to try and give people the benefit of the doubt for everything, but another incidents like this, I would be surprised if they did not end up getting banned. They were definitely DQ'd from the event for the incident, whatever ended up happening at NAIC. Like I said, we don't know for sure, but that's what everyone's been saying. So it definitely feels like it will probably lead to a ban. I've always said that I'm always a big believer in second chances. So whether or not they get to eventually come back later on, that'll be up to kind of Pokemon to decide. But yeah,
Is this
it's
not the second chance though? Right? I mean, if this happened at OCIC, you gotta wonder how many second chances does someone get.
yeah. I mean, this could be the I guess this could be the final straw. Yeah, for sure, this could be it. We might not ever see Zach ever again after this one.
I mean, I think it should just be a message to anyone out there who has maybe ever done something like that or has considered doing something like that. Eventually these things catch up to you. So you might get away with it
Definitely.
for a while, but it will catch up to you. So don't be a cheater. That's just kind of the moral of the story. Don't palm cards from your discard pile. Don't stack your deck. Don't cut your opponent's deck in a way because you know what the bottom card of their deck is, and don't mark your sleeves intentionally, though we don't know necessarily if any of these things happen. It's a touchy subject, so I want to not dive too deep into any of these things, but yeah, I mean, it was a big thing that happened, so we wanted to talk about it at least.
Yeah, at least bring it up a little bit. But yeah, let's move on from that. And let's talk about the Pokemon Go set. Actually, there was a lot of people opening up. They had the Pokemon Go set at NAIC, right? Because I saw a lot of people opening up.
Yeah, it's a little weird. I thought that the official release date was July the 1st, but I've seen on YouTube a ton of people opening it up. I did see people at the event that had it, so I don't know if some of the vendors there had it or if there was some on the prize wall maybe. I'm not sure what the situation was. I really thought that it didn't come out quite yet though.
Yeah, I had no clue. But yeah, then it was just kind of there. It was just there. So they were saw people opening it, saw a couple like TikToks or whatever on Twitter of people getting the Dittos
Yep.
in their packs. The Ditto, of course, is it can be any Pokemon card basically in a pack of the Pokemon Go set, but in the bottom left corner
I think it
of
can
the
only be
card.
one of the reverse hollows, and it's
Oh,
only
can it?
certain of the reverse hollows. It's not
Okay,
like
so maybe not
you're not gonna pull a
anything.
Radiant Charizard and it turns out it's a Ditto. Is kind of
Okay,
what
okay,
I
okay.
feel
So
like
it's
is, yeah.
okay, so a little bit more limited than that. But yeah, if there's a Ditto in the bottom left corner of one of your cards. That means you can peel off the front of that card, and there will be a Ditto behind that. I have to imagine they would feel a little thicker too, right? Like I, I feel like you'd be able to feel the difference as well if you
Yeah,
held a
probably.
Ditto card and a non-Ditto card. But super cool. Like it's like a super cool little Easter egg that they added to this set. But
I'm actually
yeah,
kind of
that's
interested
what.
what's gonna happen though because like the Ditto's a pretty good card, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like the act of peeling a card could just lead to like damaged cards pretty reasonably.
How
So
many
I
how
don't
many of
know.
them are gonna end up in bulk too? Like how many of the Ditto? There's gonna be a lot.
Who's
Like
not gonna
the
know, right?
Yeah. It's like when people would, like the people who buy bulk all the time. One of the reasons that all these big stores and stuff buy bulk is because you just never know what's going to show up in there. Sometimes people are going to throw a bunch of like really good cards in there
I have
sometimes.
heard
And there's
many stories of Umbreon V Star or Gold
oof.
Stars and like, Rockets admins and all these like 20 plus or like $100+ cards just being pulled out of bulk boxes because people just don't know.
Yeah, and the Ditto's gonna be a big one for sure. There's gonna be a lot of Dittos in the bulk. I mean, I don't know how expensive the Ditto's gonna end up being, but there will be a lot of them in there, and I'm sure kind of preserving them as like not peeling the thing will make them be worth a lot more in the future. I feel like that would be something where people want to collect like one of each Ditto
Right,
behind
right.
the
I've thought
card,
about that
right?
as well. Like that would be pretty funny. And definitely something
Uh,
people will do. So we're not going to do like a
yeah,
full set review or anything like that. We'll talk about a few more of the cards next week, but for now, we just each picked a couple of cards that we wanted to talk about. So Azul, why don't you start talking about a couple cards? Let's do this real quick
yeah.
because we're getting a little we're at an hour 40 here. So
Oh my gosh. All right. Yeah. So the first one that I had to talk about was the not just one card, but three of them: the Moltres, the Articuno, the Zapdos. They all do plus 10 damage for their respective typing. So fire, water, lightning.
like a
I
Regirock for every single type or all of those
yeah,
types.
all those types. Yeah, I think that's just gonna be pretty cool. That I think they'll all have not all of them, but at least one of them will probably have a place in some point in a format where it's just like, oh, for this specific matchup, I need 10 more damage. Like the Articuno specifically, people are playing Zigzagoon in the Palkia decks. Maybe just what if maybe Turbo Palkia comes back and you just got like 4 Articunos on your bench and you're doing plus that's a lot of extra damage that your opponent has to deal with all of a sudden. So
Or think about Vikavolt V with Zapdos, and you're getting
yeah,
item locked you're getting Quaking Punched with Choice Belt plus four of those guys in play for 120 damage. That's a lot of damage.
it's a lot scarier than the normal 50 damage for sure. So yeah, definitely could see some cool stuff. There definitely will be a moment for one of these cards, maybe all of them. Last time I think we saw something like this was with the Delmise in Metagross that did major metal Pokemon do plus 10 damage, I believe. So that one was used for a little bit in Metagross if I remember correctly. But
hmm
yeah, they'll have their moment for sure. The plus 10s are more than they seem for sure.
The first card I wanted to talk about was the Radiant Charizard for a few reasons. Obviously, it is a Charizard, and Charizard is my favorite Pokemon. It is a shiny Charizard, which is very cool, but it's actually a pretty dang good card. Its Excited Heart ability. This Pokemon's attacks cost colorless less for each prize your opponent has taken, and Combustion Blast, its attack, is used for a fire and 4 colorless. So if your opponent has taken 4 prizes, you can put this in play and it deals 250 damage for 1 fire energy. You throw a belt on there, you're doing 280, which is knocking out all of the V stars.
Yeah, the Charizard's gonna be pretty insane, I think for sure. Like it's just so good. Like a twin energy plus a fire after they've taken one prize card is doing 250. Like
Yeah.
that's pretty crazy. Like yeah, the Charizard's good. The Charizard's probably the best card in the set, I think for sure.
And
Um,
then, yeah, on to you. Yours is one we've already talked about a little bit.
yeah, the Ditto only has an ability, 70 HP basic Pokemon, sudden transformation. This Pokemon can use the attacks of any basic Pokemon in your discard pile, except for Pokemon with a rule box. So the big one that I think everyone just jumped to with this was Mad Party. So you can use this, copy the attack Mad Party from the Bumblebee, so you'll be able to hit a little bit faster, a little bit more aggressively. Maybe even get to the point where Mad Party just doesn't play or Sinesti
Sinistea, yeah.
anymore. Yeah, it's just Ditto Bumblebee at that point, maybe. So maybe a little bit of life to that deck. But cards like this are always just kind of good, right? I feel like these are always like just solid cards. And that's what I think I mentioned. Like a lot of cards in this set just make you like look at them, read them, stop and think, right? And like it's always good to have cards like that in a set for sure.
Listen, man, shout outs to Magikarp, Raging Finn, 10 plus, 30 more for each Magikarp and Gyarados in your discard pile. Okay, just saying, just saying. Move on.
Good
My
Ditto.
card, my last one I want to talk about is the Mewtwo V Star. And the first time I read this card, I was not really super hype on it. I didn't think it was going to be very good. Just having to discard a bunch of energy from your side of the field in order to attack is kind of hard to sustain multiple turns in a row, but I mean, with a choice belt, this thing just does 300 damage, which is pretty wild. And you can
Yeah.
power it up with like Energy Switch plus Galarian Moltres plays, not Moltres, sorry, Galarian Articuno. And also its V Star Power Star Raid, very reminiscent of Black Ray GX or even Holy Star from Rayquaza Gold Star if you're an old head and can remember that. Yeah, for a Psychic and Colorless, 120 to each of your opponent's Pokemon V, which counts Pokemon V, V Star, and V Max. So you can Star Raid to set everything up, and then you don't even have to discard that many energies with Psy Purge in order to take KOs. I didn't think this card was great at first. The more I think about it, the more I think this card is pretty good.
Yeah, I thought that kind of the same thing. It does have one of the probably the worst weakness to have in the game, I feel like, has generally been fighting. One of the other worst ones is also dark. So it is weak to dark. There's a lot of dark Pokemon in the format that have been splashed around in a lot of decks. So if it gets really, really good, I think the format will have plenty of answers for it. But yeah, I agree with you. When I first read it, I was like, oh, this is really good. Then I read it further and I was like, not too hype on it. But the more I've thought about the card, the more you've mentioned it as well. Like it definitely, like, it's a lot of damage. As long as you can get those Psychic Energy and play consistently, you're gonna be able to do a lot with that Psy Purge every single turn. So definitely some hope for the Mewtwo for sure going into the Pokemon Go set.
And it has 280, not 270,
Yeah,
which is definitely very key.
definitely.
All right. Well, I think that is going to wrap up this week's episode. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you again for the support. Once again, I know I had a bunch of people come up to me and say they really liked the podcast and enjoyed it a lot. So appreciate everyone who came up and did that. I'm sure Azul had plenty of people who said the same thing. If you want to support us, be sure to leave a like on the YouTube video if you're watching, or leave a rating on your favorite podcasting platform. It really does help us out a lot, and it lets more people find the cast who are also interested in Pokemon. You can also subscribe to the YouTube channel and the new podcast highlights channel. I'll be posting more highlights this week since I will actually be home and able to do that, since I was not home all the last week and a half traveling. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to check us out on social media. Myself at Trainer Chip over on Twitter, Azul at Azul_GG. And you can also follow the podcast on Twitter at Uncommon_Energy.
Yep. Appreciate it as always. The support and everything. Catch y'all next week. Peace.
Peace.